Bible, our Bible, is the history of God with man. God's history with man. God's history with man. It's also man's history with God. It's also man's history with man. But listen to this. The Bible does not purport to be the history of God. So in other words, God is much bigger than his story with man. He's before man, he's outside of time and man, and he's after man. Well, of course, we're going to live eternal, but my point is that he is much bigger than time, which is pretty much what the Bible talks about. You know, it does talk about before the foundation of the earth a little. We hear just a few smatterings, a few little tidbits before time, and we hear maybe a few things about after time. Not too much about outside of time, but that's where God mostly lives. Now, he does choose to live inside of time in order to come into our world. But it's just interesting to me that many times, I think religion teaches the Bible as being the history of God. And well, this is the totality of what God is. No, this is not the total. This is only the story that he's chosen to reveal to us about his dealings with man, man with God, and man with man. He's much bigger than that. It is not the totality of God's history. Now, with that being spoken, if that's true, and just let everybody figure that out on their own, if that's true, I have a feeling that as we come into this new emerging age, God is going to open up the greater understandings of the history of God, and he's going to invite us into those realities. Now you say, well, where's that in Scripture? Okay, John 3, verse 12, Jesus says, if I tell you earthly things and you can't believe, how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things? So there are heavenly things outside of time that are a part of the history of God. And Jesus says, can't tell you that right now. You'll choke on that. Later on, Jesus says in John, I have so many things to tell you, but you can't bear them. So I have a feeling that the Lord is just looking at us and he said, oh, I think you might be ready to graduate from kindergarten. We're maybe almost ready to go to first grade. And so how about we try a few things from the eternal realm, from the outside of time realm, from the history of God realm. Now, that's probably going to be, can I say exciting? For those who have been walking with him. It'll probably be earth-shattering and maybe offensive to those who haven't learned to really walk with him. I'm not saying they're not believers. I'm just saying they haven't learned to walk with him and learn to distinguish the authenticity of his voice. Because when he tells us stuff that we've never heard before, we may not be able to go back to the Bible to find it. We may have to base it upon the authenticity of his word, of his voice. What does his voice sound like? Have we become familiar enough that he says, okay, I think I can entrust you with something and you won't choke? And by the way, again, that's what Jesus was doing in the Gospel of John. He said, I'm not going to tell you stuff to make you choke. Well, he did actually say a lot of things that made us choke. Remember, if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, and many of them left him at that point. That was too big of a bite of steak, so they choked. But regarding the history of God, in other words, the things that are outside of time, I think Jesus is like looking at us like, I think you're becoming very familiar with my voice. You're going to be able to authenticate whether or not it's my voice. We're going to walk into things that are just going to be, well, super natural. Fun stuff. I think about those things inspire me. As a pioneer, I'm like drawn to those things. Like, Lord, where are the fresh things that you could entrust to those who are ready to graduate from kindergarten? I hope I graduate one of these days. Sometime years past, somebody had a whiteboard and they were drawing God. And of course, who can draw God? What do you do? How do you draw God? But the way that they contrasted God, which is almost indescribable, except for whatever he allows us to see in human concepts. But anyway, so here's God. It feels bigger than the whiteboard. And then inside of this whiteboard, they created or drew a little box. So coming from this direction, there was pre-time. In other words, existence. So it was coming here, and all of a sudden God says, oh, I'm going to start time. I'm going to create time. And then there's this little box called time. Now, time was a construct. Time is an invention. Time is a creation. Time is a product of his heart, of his mind. So I don't know all the reasons why he created time, but probably one of the major ones is so that you and I can live in a physical existence. Excuse me. In a physical existence. I don't know why we need days and nights and years and feasts and, I don't know why we need that. Somehow he thought we did. So he created this box. But he is much bigger than time. He's all around time. Time is this little, just one tiny invention of God. Isn't that crazy? He's so much bigger than time. But yet, as you point out, Mary Jane, he's inside of time. Not limited to time, but very present in time. I, for the most part, say that's got to be true, except there's one crazy verse in Revelation. It's a crazy verse. You guys, you'll have to figure this out. I don't have an answer for it, because I would say too that heaven is outside of time. It's bigger than time. But then in Revelation it says, and everything was quiet for 30 minutes. What? What's that about? How could that be? In our spirit reality, in the reality of our spirit, in other words, we are a spirit, and we live in a body, which is physical, but our biggest reality is our spirit. Our spirit is bigger than time, and bigger than earth, and bigger than space. It's ethereal. It's heavenly. And we might talk about this a little bit later on. But so what are the realities that our spirit can enjoy, can live in, that it also lives inside of our body, which is limited and imposed upon by time? But what does our spirit get to enjoy? Our spirit, if it comes in oneness with God, because he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him, then what kinds of freedoms does our spirit enjoy? Oh, I tell you, it just busts the brain almost. You start thinking about those things, you just almost bust your brain. Like, how can you wrap your brain around this stuff? But then again, we have to make sure that we are not creating a God in our own image. In other words, that he doesn't have to conform to my capacity to understand him. You understand that? It's like, okay, God, okay. Uncle, I say, Uncle, you're bigger than my brain, and I'm going to have to be okay with that.